Today we want to go over basically the 4 P's of marketing. The 4 P's of marketing. The fact that they all begin with a P makes them hopefully easier to remember. And each word then relates to a different aspect of marketing. And we've started each word with the letter P, once again, to help you remember it easier. So the 4 P's of marketing are product, promotion, place, and price. Product, promotion, place, and price. And when we think about this, each time you're going to market either a product or a service, these 4 P's need to be considered in proper marketing. If we're going to use an example, let's say, for instance, not just an actual product, but let's say a program, maybe a health providing program. How would we promote or market that health program? So first of all, we need to consider the product. So what is the actual physical product or service? In this case, it's a health education program. And we want to include appearance and function. So this is definitional. What is it that we are providing? Either the physical thing itself or the service provided. What is it? Define the product. You need to know the product if you're going to properly market it. So in this case, if we've got a health education program that we want to implement, we need to know everything about it that we're trying to provide. What is the information that we're desiring to get across? What are the specifics in terms of the product provided? Next, we need to think in terms of promotion. So we've defined the product. Now, how are we going to make other people aware? How are we going to promote our product? So here we want to think in terms of advertising, brochures, flyers, and you want to weigh the cost of promoting it against the size of the target audience. So we have a community in which we're trying to get our health information across to them. We want them to come and hear and receive the information, get the education for their better health. And so we're going to advertise that, perhaps radio, TV, other forms, brochures, flyers, cost of printing, all this stuff. You're going to weigh all of those costs of the various promotional ways against the size of the target audience. So for instance, if we have a community of 100,000 people that we want to reach, we've got a large target audience, therefore it's okay to spend more on broader forms of advertising. Maybe we don't want to print 100,000 brochures, but we might want to spend more on TV and radio in order to reach that broader audience. Now, if we've only got a target audience of, say, 50 in a very small community, we don't want to pay the exorbitant costs of putting out a commercial for TV, or maybe not even a radio spot. We could print 50 brochures or flyers pretty easily and get people to hand those things out. So in terms of promotion, weigh the cost of promotion against the size of the target audience. So we know what our product is that we're trying to provide. We've talked about promoting it. Now we need to think place. Where and how are we going to deliver our product to the target audience? What is our placement going to be then? So how are we going to get it to them, and where are we going to deliver it to them? So we need to make sure with our health education program that we have a proper venue. We've reserved it. We know that there's adequate facilities there. People can find it, that they'll be comfortable while they're there. If you've got a bad placement, then not many people are going to want to come and get your product. So let's say you reach a target audience that's large, but you tell them they got to drive 100 miles to get to it. Most people aren't going to drive that far to get to it unless they really, really need it. So you need to think in terms of, okay, here's what we're trying to promote. Here's the product. Here's how we're going to make people know about it. And let's now define and get in a good place that will attract people there, make it easy for them to get there, and therefore want to come and learn more about our program. In terms of products, when you think of placement, when you go to the grocery store, things that are in the middle of those aisles, not up high and not down low, but right there in the middle, easiest to reach, are usually the people who've paid most. They want their products right there where it's the easiest for someone to grab and put into their cart. Placement to them is everything. If you got to bend down to get it, that's a problem. You got to reach up high to get it, that's a problem. They want the prime place and they pay for it. So when we think in placement in terms of what we've talked about, our health education program, adequate facilities, easily gotten to, adequate to the type of people or the amount of people that we think we're going to attract, and those sorts of considerations need to be brought into play here. And then finally, price. Before you've done any marketing, we've talked about our product, we've talked about how we're going to promote it, we've found a place, but now we need to say, how much are we going to charge for it? What's the good price point here? So you need to have the actual price of materials, services, and staff, the cost to the provider versus the cost to the target audience, and then ways you can possibly bring in cost savings. So there's the actual price, and then there's the price that we're going to put on it. So the actual price would be the cost to the provider. How much to rent the place? How much for these materials? How much for the staff necessary to make sure people are comfortable? All those actual costs, and then how much are we going to charge the people for the product? If you say, well, it's going to cost us $50 a head to do this, so let's charge $150, you may have just priced yourself right out of the market. Most people may not have that kind of money, or there may be a situation where they'd say, well, I want this information, but I don't think it's worth that much, and you then shrink your audience. Whereas if you said, you know, it costs us $50, we're going to charge $75, a modest return on it, or whatever you think is appropriate, you get more people to come. So when you think of cost, you need to weigh the actual cost versus the target cost, and how you might bring in some cost savings. Perhaps we don't have to print as many brochures with 3 different colors on the glossy paper. We'll do flyers off of a copy machine and hand those out, and can reduce the cost there and pass those savings along, and thereby getting more people to come to the event. So the 4 P's of marketing: know your product, the actual physical product or service, including its appearance and function. The next P, promotion, advertising, weighing the cost of the promotion against the size of the target audience. Placement, or the place, how and where you're going to deliver to the target audience. And then the price, actual price of materials, services, staff, weighed against the cost to the target audience, and then think in terms of possible cost savings. Product, promotion, place, price are the 4 P's of marketing. If you'd like to learn more about this or related matters, underneath this video you'll find a link. If you'll click on that link, it'll take you to the website with that information, and while you're on that website you'll also find a link to an ebook that's ready for immediate download.
Microeconomics and macroeconomics. Economics studies, in general, how resources are allocated. But let's look at what the difference between microeconomics and macroeconomics really is. Microeconomics focuses on economic factors such as the way consumers behave, how income is distributed, and output and input markets. But the most important thing to remember to differentiate between microeconomics and macroeconomics is that microeconomics studies are limited to the industry or firm level. So we're looking at how the consumers behave toward a specific industry or toward a specific product, toward a specific company. How income is distributed for that specific company or for companies within a specific industry. The output and input markets for those specific industries or for a specific company. The factors considered help determine production decisions of individual firms or companies based on their resources and the cost that they would have to put in to be able to make a profit. So microeconomics is just focusing on specific industries or on specific companies. Macroeconomics examines economies on a much larger scale than microeconomics. And here's the important thing to remember to differentiate with macroeconomics. Studies look at economic trends and structures on a national level. So it's not just looking at one industry or one company. It's looking at the whole country to see how that whole country's economy is faring. What trends do they see? What structures? What's the market like in that country? Not just necessarily in a specific industry or for a specific firm or company. So, to remember that, macro is much larger, so it's a national level. Micro is smaller, so it's on the industry or firm level. So those are the important things to remember to differentiate here. Now, with macroeconomics, there are some different variables that are looked at and studied to look for these trends for a whole nation's economy. They look at output of the whole nation. Consumption of the whole nation. So what are they putting out and what are they actually consuming? All the industries, all the consumers, what are all the producers able to put out? What are all the industries able to put out? And what are the consumers actually consuming? How much is actually being purchased and used? Investment, government spending. How much is the government having to spend to keep markets stabilized? Or are they spending too much and making the markets inflated? And then net exports. How much are we actually producing that we get to ship out of the country and make an external profit on? We're not just making a profit off of people that live in our country, but we're making a profit, and that's money coming in from the outside. So we're not looking at very specific things for one industry or company. We're looking at everything as a whole for the whole nation with macroeconomics. And the overall economic condition of a nation is defined as the gross domestic product. Or the GDP. And the GDP measures a nation's economic output over a limited time period, such as a year. So it would say how much the nation was able to put out over what it was actually taking in. What's the gross domestic product that we were able to produce? So, important things to remember, economics is always going to be studying how our resources are allocated, how people are buying things, how people are selling things, how things are balancing out or not balancing out. But microeconomics is going to focus on a specific industry or firm or company, where macroeconomics is going to focus on the economy of a nation as a whole. Market failure. Certain elements are necessary to create what economists refer to as perfect competition. When you have perfect competition, it means there are plenty of suppliers providing a variety of products to meet the demands of buyers or consumers. If one of these factors is weak or lacking, the market is classified as having imperfect competition. So the factors aren't missing necessarily, they're just weak or lacking. They're not as strong as they should be. They don't have the same weight as in a perfect competition market. Now, when any of these factors or elements is missing, market failure can occur. It doesn't mean it will every time. It just makes it much more likely that market failure will occur if one of the important elements is missing. And there are 5 major types of market failure that describe what would be missing, what crucial element would be missing in order to cause that market failure and keep it from being imperfect competition or, at the best, perfect competition. So, one reason you might have market failure is that competition is inadequate. There aren't enough suppliers providing competition for the buyers. If there's only one supplier and they're putting the cost too high, buyers aren't going to buy it unless it's something they absolutely need. If there is only one company providing a good, but they're not making something that buyers want, then that's also going to be a problem. So if there's adequate competition, there are going to be a variety of products available at a variety of prices. If competition is inadequate, that will not be true, and it can lead to market failure. None of these things is a definite will lead to market failure. Just with economists analyzing why markets fail, these are some of the main reasons that markets have failed. Next, we have information is inadequate. A good example of that is with cigarettes. If the cigarette companies didn't tell people that smoking was bad, it could lead to lung cancer, it had lots of chemicals in it that were unhealthy for you, then whenever people found out that that information was inadequate, then they're going to stop buying it. And on the same page, people that didn't know smoking was bad would be buying the cigarettes even though they didn't have that information. So once the information came out, there would be a sharp drop in sales where there was an inaccurate rise in sales before people knew all of the information. So if all of the information isn't given about a product, then people may buy it ignorantly, not knowing that it's bad for them, or if people give information that is incorrect, then people may buy it not knowing that what they've been told is not actually true. So having adequate information is going to keep you in a good market situation, but inadequate information can lead to market failure. Next we have resources are not mobile. If you're a supplier and you have resources but you can't get them to the places they need to be, then you're not going to be making any money off of those resources. Some good examples are land. There are some places that need land, but you can't just transport land. For instance, England could use land because they're just on an island. But in the United States has lots of open land, but you can't just take out a chunk of Wyoming and put it over on England and say, here, you've got land. That resource is not mobile. Another resource that could be mobile, but a lot of times isn't, is people. Your labor forces. If you've got people that are willing to work for you here, but they're not willing to travel and work for you in another place, that resource of human labor is not mobile. So having resources that are mobile, if you're selling goods and products that can be shipped, then that's going to be a good thing. If you've got resources that you can't really move around, it's not so good. So if you're trying to sell real estate, it's got to stay in that one space. You can't sell it and have it move somewhere else. You can't move land to a different place, and a lot of times you can't move a whole house to different places. Some houses you can, but it's going to be a lot more expensive. So resources that are not mobile can lead to market failure. Another element that could lead to market failure is negative externalities. So these are side effects of a market that affect third parties. Now, externalities can be positive or negative. Positive externalities are not going to usually lead to market failure, where negative externalities can. Examples of negative externalities would be pollution. If in the process of manufacturing goods you are producing a lot of air pollution, people aren't going to be happy about that, and the environmentalists that complain about it can lead to market failure for whatever market was polluting the air without any proper precautions. Another example would be traffic. People buying new cars are going to be congesting areas with traffic. And so lots and lots of cars on these highways are going to have traffic. It's going to cause traffic jams at certain times of the day or certain days of the week. And so traffic can be a negative externality. Yes, the car market is good. People need to buy cars. People need to get to work. But whenever more and more people buy their own vehicles instead of carpooling or using public transit, those cars are going to all end up contributing to traffic congestion, which would be classified as a negative externality and can lead to market failure. And lastly, we have failure to provide public goods. If you don't provide something the public wants or needs, then you're not going to have a very good market. People will have to actually want or need your product in order to go out and buy it. So if you're not providing something people actually want or need, then that could lead to market failure. So market failure is not always inevitable. You've got perfect competition whenever all the elements you need are there. If one of those elements is weak, then you would have imperfect competition. And if one of those elements is missing, you could still have imperfect competition. But a lot of times, if you are missing one of the crucial elements for a perfect competition market, then you're going to end up eventually heading into market failure. And these 5 major elements that could contribute to market failure can contribute to market failure, but it will not always lead to market failure. If your business or a business is experiencing one of these crucial elements that can lead to market failure. They will need to correct it, or they most likely will experience a market failure.
Today we want to go over a production budget, what the production budget is. A production budget is the amount of product that will have to be manufactured or produced. And in order to estimate this, you have to begin first with a sales budget, a projection of how many units you'll probably sell given the budget period. So the sales budget comes in first. We think we're going to sell X units of our product over the coming fiscal year. So you begin with that number. Then you also factor in how much inventory do we want left at the end of the budget period. You don't want it to be zero, because if you've got no inventory, you might miss sales and it might mess up your production later because you only have so much production capacity. And you also don't want huge amounts of inventory left over, as that ties up resources and finances and storage space and things like this. So projected sales, how much inventory we want on hand at the end, and then you also factor in how many units do we currently have on hand. So to give you an example, we have here a basic equation. Units produced equals our projected sales, this is our sales budget, plus our desired ending inventory minus our beginning inventory, how much we have on hand. So in our example here, let's say whatever it is that we're manufacturing, projected sales are 1,200 units for the budget period. We'll say 1,200 units for the first quarter maybe. So we project to sell 1,200 units. We want 300 units left on hand at the end, and we've got 150 on hand right now. So taking our equation here, 1,200 units is what we plan to sell. We want 300 at the end, so that's a total of 1,500 units. But we've already got 150 on hand, so leaving us a remainder of 1,350. So basically, by looking at what we project to sell, what we want in inventory at the end, minus what we already have in inventory now, we arrive then at the production budget. We need to produce 1,350 units over the projected period. Production budgets are always in terms of units manufactured, not in money. Now you can, underneath this, if you want more detail, talk about unit cost, the cost of depreciation, the cost of labor, the cost of materials. Some of this can be very helpful in making a production budget, because you may say, hey, we're going to have a spike in production or a need in this particular quarter, so we want to make sure we have enough material on hand, enough manufacturing capacity, enough storage capacity in order to meet that need. So projecting ahead in terms of materials costs, labor costs, spikes, needs, how much you can actually manufacture. Let's say your manufacturing process can only churn out a certain number per month. In some months you don't want it to churn out full capacity, because then you have a whole bunch of extra on your hand. But at the same time, if you know you've got months coming up where you're going to have more need than your capacity can supply, then you'll factor that into the earlier months and produce extras to store up, so that when that need hits, you've got it ready to go and you can send it out. But the basic idea of a production budget, once again, is determining how many units to produce based on sales projections. This is what we think will sell, so that we need this many to meet this demand, plus the desired inventory at the end, minus what we currently have on hand. Well, this has just been the basic overview then of production budgets. If you'd like to learn more about this or related matters, underneath this video you'll see a link. If you'll click on that link, it'll take you to that video, it'll take you to that website that has that information. And while you're there, you'll also find a link to an ebook that's ready for immediate download. Right now we're going to briefly go over awards, award payments, award compensation, services, goods, as it relates to taxes. Are awards, safety awards, length of service awards, are awards, either monetary compensation, goods or services, taxable according to the IRS? And the IRS has stipulated that award payments are taxable as supplemental wages, although they do offer some exclusions. So there are some exclusions, but generally speaking, award payments, award goods, and award services are considered supplemental income and therefore are taxable. The cash amount or fair market value of such an award, good or service, must be on the employee's W-2 form. It has to be reported. Awards that would ordinarily be seen as excludable, however, if they are not made as part of a meaningful employer presentation, and if all they are is disguised compensations and they get ruled such by the IRS, then regardless of the exclusions, they become immediately taxable income. So basically, when the IRS provides some exclusions for certain awards and services and goods, it doesn't want that to be seen as a loophole by which people can then give compensation to their employees tax-free. But they also don't want to discourage employers from recognizing employees' length of service, safety record, things like this, and giving them some sort of compensation, goods, or services to recognize that service. So the basic idea is, generally speaking, awards, goods, and services with some exclusions are considered supplemental income and therefore are taxable, must appear on the W-2. With those exclusionary ones, the ones that can be excluded, it has to be given during a meaningful, meaning legitimate, employer presentation, and if it is at any time deemed to be merely trying to cloak compensation and give it tax-free, regardless of the exclusions, it will be immediately put into the taxable income bracket. Anyway, this has just been a basic overview of award payments and taxes. If you'd like to learn more about this or related matters, underneath this video you'll find a link. If you'll click on that link, it'll take you to the website that has that information, and while you're on that website, you'll also find a link to an ebook that's ready for immediate download.
Opportunity cost, plainly stated, is the cost of not doing something else. Whenever we purchase one good or service, we're also deciding not to buy a range of other goods and services. Take, for example, if I were to purchase a $10 haircut. Because I'm buying a $10 haircut, I cannot use those same $10 to buy pizza, or to buy a pair of socks, or to buy a basketball. Opportunity cost is defined as the cost of not doing the next best alternative. So in this case, the thing I would most like besides a haircut is pizza. So in this case, the opportunity cost of buying a $10 haircut is that I cannot buy pizza. Opportunity cost also relates to how we spend our time. Again, whenever we spend time doing one thing, we're also deciding not to spend our time doing other things. So say I decide to be a waiter. I could not be employed at other companies as well. If I were a waiter, I could not also work at the grocery store or mow lawns or rake leaves. So in this case, because I'm not a waiter, the next best option for me would be to rake leaves. So because I'm not a waiter, I cannot rake leaves. So the opportunity cost of being a waiter is that I cannot rake leaves. Opportunity cost is often discussed both in and outside of economics. Businesses try to limit their opportunity costs by always making the best decision.